You know that moment when someone says something so cruel, so cutting, that it literally stops time? Yeah, well, that happened to me last Tuesday at what was supposed to be a simple family dinner in our suburban Atlanta home. I'm Emma, and I've been the family disappointment for as long as I can remember. 28 years old, still living at home after my divorce, working at a local coffee shop instead of using my business degree. Real winner, right? So there I was, sitting at our mahogany dining table that my mother had picked out before she died 5 years ago, trying to enjoy Mom's famous meatloaf recipe that I'd attempted to recreate. My father, Richard, was going on about his latest real estate deals. My younger brother, Jake, was scrolling through his phone, and my stepmother, Diane, was pretending to care about everyone's day while secretly texting someone under the table. The conversation had turned to my cousin Sarah's recent promotion at some fancy marketing firm in downtown Atlanta. Dad was practically gushing about how proud he was of her success, how she really made something of herself. I should have seen it coming, honestly. The comparison was inevitable. You know, Emma, Dad said, cutting into his meatloaf with that condescending tone I knew all too well. Sarah really reminds me of your mother at that age. So ambitious, so driven. He paused, and I swear I could feel the blow coming. You're just a failed version of her. The words hit me like a freight train. Failed version of my mother, the woman who'd built her own interior design business from scratch, who'd been the light of every room she entered, who'd died way too young from cancer while I was still figuring out my life. But here's the thing about being knocked down so many times. Eventually, you learn how to get back up swinging. I slowly reached for my wine glass, that cheap Chardonnay from Kroger that Diane had picked up. My hand was surprisingly steady as I lifted it, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Jake had even looked up from his phone, probably expecting me to cry or run to my room like I usually did. Instead, I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Not anymore, I said, raising my glass like I was making a toast. Cheers to that, Dad. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. Diane's mouth was literally hanging open. Jake looked like he'd just witnessed a car accident. And Dad? Well, Dad looked like he'd just been slapped. See, what none of them knew was that earlier that day, I'd gotten a phone call that changed everything. A phone call about my mother's old business partner, Mrs. Chen, and a safety deposit box that Mom had left for me. A safety deposit box that apparently contained some very interesting documents about dear old Dad and his successful real estate empire. Turns out, Mom had been keeping secrets. Big ones. And now those secrets were mine. As I sipped my wine and watched my family's confused faces, I couldn't help but think about how different this conversation was going to be in a few weeks, how different everything was going to be. What's that supposed to mean? Dad asked, his voice tight with that familiar anger that used to terrify me as a kid. Oh, you'll find out soon enough, I said, standing up from the table. Thanks for dinner, Diane. It was enlightening. I walked out of that dining room with my head held high for the first time in years. Behind me, I could hear hushed, urgent whispers, but I didn't care. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Because Emma the disappointment? She was about to become their biggest nightmare. Hey y'all, if you're loving this drama already, smash that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers all over. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because, trust me, you're gonna want to see how this story unfolds. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a completely different person. You know that feeling when you finally decide to stop taking everyone's crap? Yeah, that was me. I threw on my favorite jeans and a blazer. Time to look like I had my life together, even if my bedroom still looked like a tornado hit it. Mrs. Chen had asked me to meet her at First National Bank on Peachtree Street at 10 a.m. sharp. She'd been Mom's business partner for over 15 years, and honestly, I barely knew her. After Mom died, Mrs. Chen had quietly dissolved their interior design firm and moved to Florida. I thought that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. Emma, honey, Mrs. Chen said, as she approached me in the bank lobby. She was a tiny woman, maybe 5'2", but she carried herself like she owned the place. You look just like your mother when she was your age. Unlike Dad's comparison the night before, this one didn't sting. It felt empowering. We sat in a small, sterile room while the bank employee brought us the safety deposit box. My hands were literally shaking as Mrs. Chen handed me the key. Your mother made me promise to give this to you when you were ready, she said softly. I think after 5 years, And considering what your father said at the grocery store last week, you're more than ready. Wait, what? You heard about that? Mrs. Chen smiled sadly. Honey, this is Atlanta. Word travels fast, especially when Richard Hayes is involved. Your mother always said he had a big mouth that would get him in trouble someday. I opened the box, and inside were folders. Lots of them. Financial documents, contracts, photographs, and a letter addressed to me in Mom's handwriting. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might explode. Go ahead, Mrs. Chen encouraged. Read the letter first. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and Mrs. Chen felt you were ready to know the truth. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive, but I needed to protect you. Your father isn't the successful businessman he pretends to be. His real estate empire? It was built with money stolen from our business. Money that was meant for your college fund, for our future, for your dreams. I have evidence of everything. Forged documents, falsified loan applications, and most importantly, proof that he's been laundering money through fake property deals for the Castellano family. Emma, my brave girl, you deserve so much more than the life he's given you. Use this information wisely. Make him pay for what he stole from us. I love you more than words can express. Mom, I couldn't breathe. The Castellanos? As in, the crime family that controlled half of Atlanta's underground scene? My boring suburban dad was mixed up with the freaking mob? Mrs. Chen was watching my face carefully. Your mother spent 2 years gathering evidence before she got sick. She was planning to expose him. But then the cancer... I flipped through the documents with shaking hands. Bank statements showing mysterious cash deposits. Contracts for properties that didn't exist. Photos of Dad meeting with known Castellano associates at some dive bar in Little 5 Points. Holy crap, I whispered. He's been living a lie this whole time. A very expensive lie, Mrs. Chen confirmed. That house you're living in, your stepmother's jewelry, your brother's fancy car, all bought with dirty money. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why we'd always had money despite Dad's supposedly struggling real estate business. Why he was always stressed, always angry, always putting everyone else down to make himself feel bigger. What am I supposed to do with this? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Mrs. Chen leaned forward. That's up to you, honey. But your mother believed you were strong enough to handle the truth, strong enough to get justice. I thought about last night's dinner, about Dad calling me a failed version of Mom, about all the years of being made to feel small and worthless. Not anymore. I need copies of everything, I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. And Mrs. Chen, I'm gonna need your help. She smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't sad. I was hoping you'd say that. Your mother would be so proud. As we left the bank, I felt like I was walking into a completely new life. Emma the disappointment was dead. Emma the truth seeker had just been born, and Dad had no idea what was coming for him. Okay, so here's the thing about having life-changing information. You can't just march into your house and be like, hey Dad, I know you're basically a criminal. Nope. You gotta be smart about it. Strategic. And let me tell you, I was about to become the Nancy Drew of family drama. I spent the next 3 days acting completely normal. Well, normal for post-dinner disaster Emma. I went to work at Java Junction, made lattes for Georgia Tech students, and pretended everything was fine. But every free moment, I was studying those documents like my life depended on it. The coffee shop became my headquarters. My manager Tyler was this cool guy from Savannah who minded his own business, which was perfect, because I'd spread papers across the back office during my breaks like some kind of conspiracy theorist. Girl, what are you working on back there? Asked Keisha, my coworker, and honestly, my only real friend. You look like you're planning to overthrow the government or something. If only she knew how close to the truth she was. Just some family stuff, I said, which wasn't technically a lie. The documents were a gold mine. Dad had been skimming money from Mom's business accounts for years, using it to buy properties that he'd then sell to Castellano front companies for way more than they were worth. Classic money laundering. And he'd been doing it right under Mom's nose until she got suspicious. But here's where it gets really messed up. Some of those properties, they were in neighborhoods that got revitalized after mysterious fires, or sudden crime spikes that scared residents into selling cheap. I'm talking about stuff that would make your skin crawl. I needed more information, so I did what any millennial would do. I started stalking social media and public records online. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. That's when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. 3 years ago, There was a fire at an apartment complex in East Atlanta, a complex that Dad had purchased just 2 weeks before it burned down. 7 families lost their homes, and 1 elderly man died from smoke inhalation. His name was Mr. Rodriguez. He'd lived there for 30 years. I found myself crying in the Java Junction bathroom, thinking about Mr. Rodriguez's granddaughter posting on Facebook about how he'd refused to move because it was the only home he'd ever known in America. And my father, my own father, might have been involved in his death. That night at dinner, I watched Dad differently, really watched him. The way he cut his food with precise, controlled movements, the way he dominated conversations, the way he looked at me like I was nothing. "Emma, you're being weird," Jake said, shoving mashed potatoes in his mouth. "You keep staring at Dad like he's got food on his face or something." "Just thinking," I said carefully. "About what? Your next career failure?" Dad asked with that cruel laugh of his. Diane giggled like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. God, I couldn't stand her. "Actually, I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately," I said, watching his face. "About her business, about what happened to all her hard work after she died." For just a split second, I saw something flicker in Dad's eyes. Fear? Guilt? But then it was gone, replaced by his usual dismissive expression. "Your mother was a dreamer, Emma. Not everyone can handle the real world like I do." The real world. Right. Like consorting with criminals was somehow more noble than creating beautiful spaces for people to live in. "Maybe," I said, taking a sip of water, "but some dreams are worth fighting for." After dinner, I went to my room and called Mrs. Chen. "I found something," I told her, "about a fire in East Atlanta 3 years ago." There was silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh. "Your mother was investigating that when she got sick. She was going to contact the police, but then she died, and everyone forgot about Mr. Rodriguez. Not everyone, honey. Not us." That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to expose Dad's financial crimes. I was going to make sure he paid for everything, including the things that couldn't be measured in dollars. Some people might call it revenge. I called it justice. And honestly, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a real purpose. Mom would have been proud. You know what they say about the best laid plans? Well, mine was about to get a whole lot more complicated thanks to my stepmother's big mouth and some seriously bad timing. It was Friday afternoon, and I was at Java Junction pretending to work while actually researching property records on my laptop. I'd found 2 more suspicious fires connected to Dad's deals when Diane walked in with her book club friends. You know the type, all Lululemon and fake concern. "Oh, Emma," Diane called out in that voice that made my skin crawl. "Can we get our usual?" Her usual was 5 complicated drinks that took forever to make. But today, I was actually grateful for the distraction. I needed to act normal while my brain was literally exploding with criminal evidence. As I made their vanilla lattes with oat milk and extra foam, because of course, I couldn't help but overhear their conversation. These women gossiped like it was an Olympic sport. "Did you hear about the Castellano boy getting arrested last week?" one of them was saying. My hand froze on the espresso machine. The Castellanos. The same family from Mom's documents. "Which one?" "There are so many of them," Diane laughed. "Tony. Apparently he was caught with a bunch of fake real estate contracts. The FBI is investigating the whole family now." I felt like I might throw up right there behind the counter. The FBI was investigating the Castellanos, which meant they might already know about Dad's connections. "That's terrible," Diane said, but she sounded more excited than concerned. "Richard mentioned that family once. Said they were bad news." "Oh, he mentioned them, did he?" I bet he did. I finished their drinks with shaking hands and tried to act casual as they left. But as soon as they were gone, I called Mrs. Chen. "We have a problem," I told her. "The FBI is investigating the Castellanos. If they find Dad's connection..." "Honey, slow down. This might actually be good news." Good news? Was she crazy? Think about it, Emma. If the FBI is already building a case, your mother's evidence could be exactly what they need. You wouldn't be going after your father alone. You'd be helping federal agents put away an entire criminal organization. That actually made sense, and it made me feel a lot less like I was planning some kind of crazy revenge scheme. But how do I contact them without Dad finding out? Leave that to me. I have a friend whose daughter works for the Atlanta FBI field office. Let me make some calls. That weekend, I was a nervous wreck. Every time Dad looked at me, I was convinced he could read my mind. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. And when Jake mentioned that Dad had been making a lot of business calls lately, I nearly lost it completely. Sunday dinner was particularly tense. Dad seemed distracted. Diane was unusually quiet. And Jake was, well, Jake, completely oblivious to everything. "Emma, you've barely touched your food," Dad observed. "Still moping about your pathetic life?" Usually, a comment like that would have sent me running to my room in tears. But now I just smiled. "Actually, Dad, I've been thinking about making some changes. Maybe it's time I started taking more responsibility for my life." He looked surprised. "About time. What kind of changes?" "Oh, maybe getting involved in some family business, learning about real estate, understanding how you built your empire." The fork slipped from his hand and clattered onto his plate. Diane's head snapped up from her phone. Even Jake looked interested. "My business is complicated, Emma. Not something you'd understand. Try me. I'm smarter than you think." The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. "Some things are better left alone," he said finally. "Maybe, but I've always been curious about Mom's old business records. The ones that went missing after she died?" This time, there was no mistaking the fear in his eyes. "Bingo. Those records weren't important," he said quickly. "Just old client lists and invoices." Seems weird that they'd just disappear then. I mean, wouldn't there be tax implications? Legal reasons to keep them? Diane was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Jake had actually put down his phone. And Dad? Dad looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "Emma, I think you should focus on your own problems instead of digging into things that don't concern you." There it was, the threat wrapped in fatherly advice. But this time, I wasn't backing down. "Oh, but they do concern me, Dad. More than you know." That night, Mrs. Chen called with news that changed everything. "I spoke to my contact at the FBI. They want to meet with you tomorrow." Tomorrow? Holy crap, this was really happening. "Emma, are you ready for this?" I thought about Mr. Rodriguez, about Mom's stolen dreams, about years of being made to feel worthless. "Yeah," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'm ready." Walking into the FBI field office on Ted Turner Drive felt like stepping into a movie. You know those scenes where the regular person suddenly finds themselves in the middle of some huge conspiracy? Yeah, that was me, except instead of looking cool and confident, I was pretty sure I looked like I was about to throw up. Agent Sarah Mitchell was nothing like what I expected. She was probably in her early 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded me of my high school math teacher, the one who actually cared whether you understood the material. "Emma, thank you for coming," she said, leading me to a small conference room. "Mrs. Chen has told me a lot about you and your mother." Mrs. Chen was already there, looking more serious than I'd ever seen her. On the table were copies of all the documents from Mom's safety deposit box, plus a bunch of other papers I didn't recognize. "Before we start," Agent Mitchell said, "I need you to understand something. What you've brought us is significant evidence in an ongoing federal investigation. This isn't just about your father anymore. This is about a criminal organization that's been operating in Atlanta for over a decade." My stomach dropped. "How significant?" "Significant enough that your safety might be at risk once we move forward." Great. Just great. I'd gone from family disappointment to potential mob target in less than a week. "Your mother's records show a pattern of money laundering that we've been trying to prove for 3 years," Agent Mitchell continued. "But more importantly, they connect your father directly to several suspicious fires and property deals that resulted in displacement of low-income families. And one death," I added quietly. "Yes, Mr. Rodriguez. We've been investigating that fire, but until now, we couldn't establish a clear connection to the Castellano organization." She showed me photographs that made my blood run cold. Dad, clearly recognizable, meeting with Tony Castellano at various locations around Atlanta. Dad handing over envelopes. Dad shaking hands with men I didn't recognize but who looked like they could break someone's legs for fun. "The problem is," Agent Mitchell said, "we need more than just these documents. We need testimony, and we need current evidence, the kind that shows ongoing criminal activity." "What does that mean?" Mrs. Chen reached across the table and took my hand. "It means you'd have to go back home and act normal while wearing a wire. A wire. Like an actual recording device." I felt like I was going to faint. "I know it's scary," Agent Mitchell said gently. "But based on your father's recent behavior, the increased phone calls, the meetings, the nervousness you described, we think he's planning something big, probably trying to distance himself from the Castellanos before their legal troubles get worse. Which means he might try to destroy evidence, Mrs. Chen added. Or worse, he might try to silence anyone who knows too much. The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. Anyone who knows too much. Like me. If I do this, I said slowly, what happens to my family? To Jake? He doesn't know anything about any of this. We'll make sure Jake is protected. And Diane too, if necessary. But Emma, you need to understand. If your father is planning to cut ties with the Castellanos, he's going to be desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. I thought about dinner the night before, about the way Dad had looked at me when I mentioned Mom's business records, about the years of verbal abuse and emotional manipulation. What do you need me to do? Agent Mitchell smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. We need you to be brave, and we need you to trust us. 3 hours later, I walked out of that FBI office with a tiny recording device hidden in my bra and a phone number I was supposed to call if anything went wrong. I felt like a completely different person, part terrified, part exhilarated, and completely determined to see this through. But as I drove home to Brookhaven, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every car behind me seemed suspicious. Every person at red lights seemed to be staring. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe Agent Mitchell was right about desperate people doing dangerous things. That night at dinner, I tried to act normal, but normal felt impossible when you're wearing a wire, and your father is potentially planning to destroy evidence of his crimes. You seem different lately, Emma, Dad said, cutting into his steak with unnecessary force. More confident. Maybe I'm finally growing up, I replied, hoping the tremor in my voice wasn't as obvious as it felt. Growing up, he repeated. That's good, because childish curiosity can get people into trouble. The threat was crystal clear, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down. Don't worry, Dad. I'm learning to be very careful about the company I keep. The look he gave me could have frozen hell over, but I just smiled and took another bite of my dinner, knowing that every word was being recorded by the FBI. Game on. You want to know what's worse than discovering your father is a criminal? Discovering that your stepmother has known all along and your brother might be in deeper than anyone realized. It was Tuesday night, and I'd been wearing the wire for 3 days with nothing more exciting than Dad complaining about property taxes and Jake asking for money for gas. I was starting to think maybe the FBI had overestimated how interesting our family dinners were. Then Diane's sister called. I was in the kitchen, supposedly cleaning dishes but actually trying to position myself where I could hear Dad's phone conversations, when Diane's cell rang. She was in the living room, and I guess she thought everyone was upstairs because she didn't bother lowering her voice. No, Linda, I can't come to Miami right now, she was saying. Richard's dealing with some business complications. Business complications. That was one way to put it. I know. But remember what happened to the Kowalski family when they tried to get out? I'm not risking that. The Kowalski family. I'd never heard that name before, but the way Diane said it made my skin crawl. I crept closer to the kitchen doorway, my heart pounding so loud I was sure she'd hear it. Look, I've kept quiet for 8 years about what really happened to Richard's first wife. I'm not about to start talking now. What really happened to Mom? The phone slipped from my suddenly numb fingers and crashed to the kitchen floor. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Emma, you okay in there? Diane called out, her voice sharp with suspicion. Yeah, just dropped something, I managed to say, scrambling to pick up the phone pieces. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold them. When I looked up, Diane was standing in the doorway, watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not the fake stepmother smile, or the dismissive eye roll. Something calculating, something dangerous. You should be more careful, she said slowly. Broken things can cut you if you're not paying attention. That night, I called Agent Mitchell from my car in the Java Junction parking lot. She knows something about my mother's death, I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. Diane said she's kept quiet about what really happened for 8 years. There was silence on the other end of the line. Agent Mitchell? Are you there? I'm here. Emma, your mother's death certificate lists cause of death as complications from cancer. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if... I couldn't finish the sentence. The possibility was too horrible to say out loud. We'll look into it. But Emma, you need to be extra careful now. If Diane suspects you overheard that conversation, she does. She definitely does. Okay, we're going to accelerate our timeline. How quickly can you get your father to talk about the Castellano connection? I thought about it. Dad had been on edge all week. making hushed phone calls and disappearing for hours at a time. If the FBI was right about him planning something big, maybe I could push him into revealing it. What if I told him I'd been asking questions around town, made him think someone else was getting suspicious? That could work, but it's also very dangerous. Dangerous. Yeah, that seemed to be the theme of my life lately. The next morning, I put my plan into action. I waited until Dad was having his coffee and reading the news on his iPad, his most relaxed time of day. "Hey, Dad," I said casually, pouring myself orange juice. "Weird thing happened yesterday. Mrs. Patterson from down the street asked me if you were having financial troubles." His head snapped up so fast I thought he might get whiplash. "What?" "She said some men in suits were asking around the neighborhood about you. Wanted to know about your business, your associates, stuff like that." I watched the color drain from his face. Bingo. What kind of men? What did they look like? "I don't know, Dad. She just said they seemed official, like government official." He was up and pacing now, running his hands through his hair. I'd never seen him this agitated. "Listen to me very carefully, Emma. If anyone, and I mean anyone, asks you questions about me or my business, you don't know anything. You understand? But Dad, if you haven't done anything wrong..." "Emma!" His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Some people don't care about right and wrong. They care about protecting themselves, and they'll hurt innocent people to do it. People like the Castellanos?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Dad went completely still, like a deer that just heard a hunter's footstep. "Where did you hear that name?" "Around town. People talk, Dad. Especially when the FBI is investigating someone." For a moment, I thought he might have a heart attack right there in our kitchen. His face went gray, and he gripped the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "The FBI," he repeated slowly. "Dad, what's going on? What did you do?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Not anger, not disappointment, pure, raw terror. "I tried to protect this family," he said quietly. "Everything I did for us." "What did you do, Dad?" He opened his mouth to answer, and that's when we heard the front door slam. "Richard." Diane's voice echoed through the house, panicked and sharp. "We need to talk. Now." Dad and I stared at each other for a heartbeat, and I knew that whatever came next was going to change everything. The wire hidden in my bra felt like it was burning against my skin as footsteps approached the kitchen. What happened next was like watching a dam burst. All the secrets, all the lies, all the careful pretending, it all came crashing down in our kitchen at exactly 8:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. Diane burst through the kitchen doorway looking like she'd seen a ghost. Her perfect hair was a mess, her makeup was smudged, and she was clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. "They arrested Tony Castellano this morning," she gasped. "It's all over the news. They're saying he's cooperating with federal investigators." Dad's coffee mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the tile floor. The sound seemed to snap him back to reality. "Pack a bag," he told Diane. "We're leaving. Now." "Wait, what?" I stepped between them and the kitchen doorway. "Dad, what's going on? Why would you need to leave because some random guy got arrested?" "Emma, move," he said, his voice deadly calm. "This doesn't concern you." Like hell it doesn't. All the fear and anger I'd been bottling up for days came pouring out. "I know about the money laundering, Dad. I know about the fake property deals. I know about the fires and the families you displaced, and Mr. Rodriguez who died because of your greed." The silence that followed was deafening. Diane's mouth fell open. Dad's face cycled through about 5 different emotions before settling on a cold rage I'd never seen before. "How do you know about that?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it felt more threatening than if he'd been shouting. "Mom knew, Dad. She figured it out before she died, and she left evidence. All of it. That's impossible. I destroyed everything. You destroyed her business files. You didn't destroy her personal records." Diane made a strangled sound. "Richard, tell me she doesn't have actual evidence." "Shut up, Diane." Dad was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Where is it, Emma?" "Safe, where you can't get to it." "Nothing is safe from me, you stupid girl. Nothing." He took a step toward me, and for the first time in my life, I was genuinely afraid he might hurt me. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've put this family in danger of?" "I put us in danger?" I laughed, but it came out sharp and bitter. "You're the one who got in bed with criminals. You're the one who stole from Mom's business. You're the one who..." "I'm the one who kept us alive," he roared. "You think the Castellanos give you a choice? You think when they decide they need your help you get to say no? What are you talking about? Dad ran his hands through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. 8 years ago, I made a mistake. A big one. I borrowed money from the wrong people to keep your mother's business afloat during her treatments. When I couldn't pay it back, they forced you to launder money through the business, I finished. They did more than that. His voice broke. Your mother found out what was happening. She was going to the police, going to expose everything. She didn't care that it would get us all killed. The kitchen seemed to tilt sideways. What are you saying? Diane was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Richard, don't. She's going to find out anyway, he snapped. Better she hears it from me. He turned back to me, and I saw something that might have been regret in his eyes. Your mother's cancer was real, Emma, but the complications that killed her, those weren't natural. The world stopped, actually stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was telling me. They poisoned her, I whispered. They made it look like treatment complications. Said if I kept my mouth shut and continued working with them, they'd leave the rest of the family alone. I was going to be sick. I was actually going to throw up right there on the kitchen floor. My mother, my beautiful, brave, wonderful mother, had been murdered, and my father had let it happen. You let them kill her. The words came out flat, emotionless. I think I was in shock. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, I screamed. You could have gone to the police. You could have protected her. You could have been a man instead of a coward, and gotten us all killed. What would that have accomplished? It would have been the right thing to do. The right thing? Dad laughed bitterly. The right thing doesn't keep your children safe, Emma. The right thing doesn't put food on the table or pay for your college or... I never went to college because you stole my college fund. I did what I had to do to survive. No, I said, backing toward the kitchen window. You did what was easy. You chose money over Mom's life, and you've been choosing money over everything else ever since. Emma, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I pulled out my phone, my hands surprisingly steady. I understand that you're a murderer. Who are you calling? Diane asked frantically. The FBI. Dad lunged for my phone, but I was faster. I hit speed dial and held it up, out of his reach. Agent Mitchell, it's Emma. I need you to come now. My father just confessed to letting the Castellanos murder my mother. The phone crackled with Agent Mitchell's voice, urgent and clear. Emma, get out of the house. Right now. But it was too late. Dad had pulled a gun from somewhere. The junk drawer, maybe? And he was pointing it directly at my chest. Nobody's going anywhere, he said, his voice eerily calm. We're going to figure this out as a family. That's when I realized the wire I was wearing had been recording everything. Every word. Every confession. Every threat. And Agent Mitchell was still on the phone, listening to it all. You know how they say your life flashes before your eyes in moments of danger? Well, that's not what happened to me. Instead, I heard my mother's voice, clear as day, saying something she used to tell me when I was little. Sometimes, Emma, being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. So I did the right thing. Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the gun pointed at my chest. Agent Mitchell can hear everything right now. The FBI knows where I am. They know what you just confessed to, and they're probably already on their way. His hand wavered slightly. You're lying. Am I? You want to bet our lives on that? Through the kitchen window, I could see black SUVs turning onto our street. A lot of them. Richard, Diane whispered. There are cars outside. The gun clattered to the floor as Dad's shoulders sagged in defeat. It was like watching a balloon deflate. All the fight just went out of him in one breath. I'm sorry, Emma, he said. And for the first time in years, he sounded like the father I remembered from before Mom got sick. I'm so sorry. The next few minutes were chaos. FBI agents swarming through our house, Miranda rights being read, neighbors gathering on their front lawns to gawk at the drama. Jake came home from his friend's house to find his father in handcuffs, and his sister giving a statement to federal agents. Emma, what the hell is happening? He asked, his face pale with shock. I'll explain everything later, I promised, squeezing his hand. But Jake, we're going to be okay. For the first time in a long time, we're actually going to be okay. Agent Mitchell found me an hour later, sitting on our front porch while crime scene techs processed the house. How are you holding up? She asked, settling down beside me. Honestly, I feel like I should be more upset than I am. My father just got arrested for conspiracy to murder my mother, and I'm the one who turned him in. Shouldn't I be crying or something? Grief doesn't follow rules, Emma. Neither does relief. Relief. Yeah, that was exactly what I felt. Like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted off my shoulders. What happens now? Your father's confession, combined with your mother's evidence and what we already had on the Castellanos, is going to put a lot of bad people away for a very long time. Your testimony will be crucial for the prosecution. And Jake? Diane? Jake's clean. We've been monitoring his activities and he really didn't know anything. As for Diane, Agent Mitchell paused. She's agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Apparently, she's been keeping detailed records of her own, just in case. Of course she had. Diane was nothing if not a survivor. 6 months later, I was sitting in a federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta, watching my father get sentenced to 25 years in prison. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. Richard Hayes, you facilitated the murder of your own wife for financial gain. The court finds this to be one of the most heinous betrayals of family trust we have ever seen. Jake was there with me, along with Mrs. Chen and Agent Mitchell. We'd become an unlikely little family over the past months, bonded by truth and justice instead of secrets and lies. After the sentencing, we went to Mom's grave. I'd brought fresh flowers, the white roses she used to love, and for the first time since her death, I felt like I could finally talk to her properly. Mom, I said, kneeling down to place the roses on her headstone. I did it. I got justice for you. I got justice for Mr. Rodriguez and all the other families Dad hurt. I kept my promise. Jake stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Over the past 6 months, my little brother had grown up fast. Learning that your father is a murderer and your stepmother is an accomplice will do that to you. But he'd handled it better than I expected. Maybe because he'd never really felt close to Dad the way I once had. You think she knows? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said, standing up and brushing dirt off my knees. I think she knows. Mrs. Chen had been quiet during the service, but as we walked back to the cars, she pulled me aside. Your mother would be so proud of you, Emma. Not just for what you did, but for who you've become, who I'd become. That was the thing that surprised me most about this whole experience. For years, I'd thought of myself as Emma, the disappointment, Emma, the failure, Emma who couldn't get her life together. But somewhere along the way, maybe when I raised that wine glass at dinner, maybe when I opened Mom's safety deposit box, maybe when I faced down Dad's gun, I'd become someone else entirely. Emma, the truth teller, Emma, the fighter, Emma who wasn't afraid anymore. So what's next? Agent Mitchell asked, as we stood in the cemetery parking lot. Any big plans for your new life? I looked around at these people who'd helped me find my strength, who'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and I smiled. Actually, yeah. I'm thinking about going back to school, maybe studying law. Turns out I'm pretty good at this justice thing. Agent Mitchell laughed. I think you'd make an excellent lawyer, or FBI agent if you're interested. Maybe. Right now, I just want to help people the way you all helped me. Jake and I drove home to our new apartment in Virginia Highland. We'd sold the Brookhaven house and everything in it, wanting a fresh start away from all those memories. It was smaller than what we'd grown up with, but it was ours. Bought with clean money from Mom's life insurance policy that Dad had never been able to touch. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Jake knocked on my bedroom door. Emma, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? Because sometimes you get this look, like you're sad about something, and I just want to make sure you're okay. I thought about his question. Was I happy? It was complicated. I was proud of what we'd accomplished, relieved that the truth was finally out, and excited about the future. But I was also dealing with grief, not just for Mom, but for the father I thought I knew, for the family I thought we were, for the innocence we'd all lost. I'm getting there, I told him honestly. Some days are harder than others. But Jake, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. He hugged me then, my little brother who wasn't so little anymore, and I knew we were going to be okay. More than okay, actually. We were going to be free. Later, alone in my room, I opened my laptop and started typing. Agent Mitchell had suggested I write down everything that happened, both for my own healing and because my story might help other people in similar situations. At first, I'd resisted. Who wants to relive their family's destruction? But now I understood the power of telling the truth, even when it's painful. My name is Emma Hayes, I wrote, and this is the story of how I discovered my father was a murderer and chose justice over family loyalty. It felt good to write those words. It felt like freedom. The legal proceedings continued for another year. Dad pled guilty to conspiracy charges and accessory to murder. 3 Castellano family members were convicted of racketeering and murder. Tony Castellano got life without parole. Diane served 18 months and moved back to Miami to live with her sister. Through it all, Jake and I built our new life. He started college at Georgia State, studying business, but with plans to focus on ethical practices and corporate responsibility. I enrolled in pre-law classes at Georgia Perimeter College, working part-time at a legal aid office where I helped families navigate the justice system. On the anniversary of Dad's sentencing, Jake and I went back to Mom's grave. This time, we brought a bottle of her favorite wine and 2 glasses. To Mom, I said, raising my glass to the sky. The strongest woman we ever knew. To Mom, Jake echoed. And to you, Emma, for being just like her. As we sat there in the peaceful cemetery, watching the sun set over Atlanta, I thought about that dinner a year and a half ago, when Dad called me a failed version of her mother. He'd been wrong about so many things, but he'd been especially wrong about that. I wasn't a failed version of my mother. I was exactly the daughter she'd raised me to be, brave enough to fight for truth, strong enough to stand up to bullies, and loving enough to protect the people who mattered. And that was more than enough. Hey everyone, we've reached the end of Emma's incredible journey from family disappointment to truth-seeking hero. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you thought about Emma's transformation. Also, don't forget to subscribe because I've got more dramatic family stories coming your way. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones keeping the biggest secrets, but stories like Emma's prove that the truth always finds a way to surface. Until next time, remember, you're stronger than you think, and justice is always worth fighting for.